In this week's drive, we get around the opposition at a rainy Nurburgring, share a brief lead with Paul Tracy at the airport, fall down, drop out and try moonwalking in Brazil, and bang wheels with the champ's son at Monza. All this and more in this week's Drive. We're only just into the second half of the 2004 Formula One season, but already the drivers' and constructors' titles are all but decided. Michael Schumacher has won 9 of the first 10 races this year and holds a commanding 18-point lead at the top of the drivers' standings. The German took his 3rd victory in 4 French Grand Prix at Manicure and is on his way to a 5th Formula One title in a row. In an interview recorded before the French race, Ferrari's recently appointed new managing director, Frenchman Jean Todt, is delighted by the achievements of Schumacher and his teammate Rubens Barrichello in 2004.
Definitely, the first part of the season is outstanding. 8 wins out of 9 Grand Prix, Ferrari leading the Manufacturers' Championship, Michael the Drivers' Championship, Rubens in the 2nd position. Rubens is the only driver to have scored points in all the Grand Prix, so it's unique. But I mean, it's still another half in front of us, so we must remain focused, concentrated, because our competitors are very strong and they will fight as much as they can to be in front of Ferrari. So we want to remain in front of them.
With Jenson Button, Jarno Trulli and Fernando Alonso in fine form, Williams and McLaren's time as Ferrari's main rivals is effectively at an end. BAR and Renault have both made giant strides forward in terms of race results this season. Ferrari have reached a new level of consistency that teams and drivers of the future will struggle to match. 6 second-place finishes have seen Barrichello safeguard 2nd place in the drivers' standings, and he's scored championship points in all 10 races to date. Michael and his brother Ralph have the same business manager, Willy Weber, who represents them as professional racing drivers. Weber has accused US doctors of incompetence after a German clinic said Ralph had suffered 2 spinal fractures in his huge crash during the US Grand Prix and could be out of racing for up to 3 months.
In der Klinik, da wurden plötzlich festgestellt, dass Ralf 2 Frakturen an der Wirbelsäule hat.
All of a sudden, doctors noticed that Ralph has 2 spinal fractures, which unfortunately were not noticed in America. Or maybe the spine was not as thoroughly checked, which is of course very, very bad, since the German doctors said he should never have been released so quickly and moved with these injuries. A lot of negative things could have still happened. The implications are clear. If a driver has an accident, a replacement driver will be put into the car. Whoever that might be, I don't know. The team needs to decide that. Doctors are saying the recovery time will take 8 to 12 weeks, whatever that means. It can be more, it can be less. I don't know. I'm not a doctor. The fact is that Ralph won't be able to participate in the next 3 races. I was there during the examination at the hospital yesterday, and his reaction, just like mine, was not very positive. You really have to ask yourself what they did in America, and when you're given this type of information after an examination, it's not fun.
Test driver Marc Genet will take Ralph's seat in the Williams for the period of his recuperation.
One day before his birthday, it was quite a surprise, of course, in every sense of the word.
Ralph has revealed that he will move to Toyota next year, and his teammate, Juan Pablo Montoya, is going to McLaren. It's been suggested that Australian driver Mark Webber will move from Jaguar to join Williams. One of the most powerful figures in world motor racing, Max Mosley, stunned the motorsport community with a surprise announcement that he will stand down as FIA president in October. The 64-year-old Briton will retire a year early. The FIA oversees the motoring clubs of 119 countries and several world championships and more than 600 international motorsport competitions. The suave and aristocratic English barrister has for decades been close to Bernie Ecclestone, Formula One's commercial supremo, and his departure will be seen as the end of a formidable double act. Son of the British pre-war fascist leader Oswald Mosley and Diana Mitford, Mosley was an amateur Formula 2 driver, driving in the same race in 1968 in which world champion Jim Clark lost his life. He co-founded the March Formula 1 team, for which Jackie Stewart drove, before joining Ken Tyrrell's team. Stewart won the world title 3 times and later founded what is now the Jaguar team. Mosley became FIA president in 1993 and was re-elected twice, leading an organisation celebrating its centenary this year. He had to cope with the deaths of Ayrton Senna and Roland Ratzenberger at the San Marino Grand Prix in 1994.
By the loss of probably the greatest racing driver of all time, certainly the greatest of his generation, it gets to the point where it's very difficult to understand what has happened or the effect that that is going to have on the whole of motorsport.
He also made rule changes to make Formula 1 more exciting.
Then team orders which interfere with a race result are prohibited. There will be no more team orders which can interfere with the race and the result of the race.
Mosley has always been passionate about safety on the track and the road. And here, Michael Schumacher helps Max experience a 10-km/h crash. Under Mosley's direction, the FIA severely criticised the way that the car industry conducted crash tests and promoted tougher testing to simulate real crash situations. It awarded star awards to cars that were safer in crashes, and this campaign has forced the car industries to make greater strides in road safety.
For the first time ever, we have a small family car with 5 stars. And as you will see shortly, that is the new Renault Megane.
Campaigns followed to improve child crash safety and other in-car hazards. New tests, which involved impact with a pole and a pedestrian, have prompted other improvements. At that same conference, the World Motorsport Council suggested moves to slow down Formula 1 cars on the grounds of safety.
There is this question of the performance of the cars. There is no doubt that they are now too fast. They're on the limit of what we can deal with our safety precautions. And as a result of that, we are giving formal notice, which we can do under the Concord Agreement, to the technical working group to produce measures to slow the cars. And what happens is that if they don't produce the measures, then we are entitled to impose measures, having given them a reasonable time and so on. So that's the exact situation at the moment. And the World Council was unanimous in the decision that this notice should be given to the technical working group. Well, over the last 7 years, the lap times in places like Imola, Melbourne, Monza, just for example, have decreased by as much as 8 or 9 seconds. Now that is a massive change in speed. We can accommodate a tenth or two each year by improving the safety precautions of the cars, improving the facilities at the circuits, the runoff areas, the crash barriers and so on. But it's very difficult to deal with increases in speed of the order of a second or more a year. There are various things we could do with the tyres, but the essence of it is we need to reduce the grip. But there are several ways of doing that. We're quite prepared to talk to the tyre companies about that. But one of the side effects of reducing the grip is we may have less debris off the line and less grip on the line. And those two things taken together mean that quite possibly we'll have a better opportunity for overtaking as well. That would be a benefit.
It's been suggested that engines drop from 3-litre V10s to 2.4-litre V8s. The second leg of the Le Mans Endurance Series, a 1,000-kilometre race at the Nurburgring, was plagued by unpredictable weather conditions. During both qualifying and the race, the conditions changed, going from dry to rain to damp to drying to dry, so it was a case of constant tyre changing, with no certainty as to whether or not the correct choice had been made. Johnny Herbert and Pierre Caffer in identical Audis quickly slipped by the early leader, Nicolas Manassian, in a DBA. Caffer suffered a setback with an excursion into the gravel as a wet track caused problems for several drivers. But when the German driver handed over to Alan McNish, their car was within 8 seconds of the leader, Jamie Davies, who had taken over from Johnny Herbert. In the changeable weather, McNish made the correct tyre choices and was able to pass the young Englishman. Not so lucky was Jamie Campbell-Walker, who took over from Manassian. Damage to the bodywork cost them any chance of an overall victory, although they fought back to finish a lap down on race leader Alan McNish. It was Scotsman McNish's first victory since a bad accident caused concussion and ended his participation in the Le Mans 24-hour race. The two Audis took a 1-2 finish, with Manassian and Jamie Campbell-Walker third.
Like endurance racing, you never know until the finish what the result is going to be, but I'm very, very happy. Today, to be honest, Pierre Caffer is the hero, not me.
Another Audi was running in a solid third place until it was hit with just 1 hour to go by an out-of-control Porsche, promoting the Manassian Campbell-Walker car onto the podium. The next round is on the 13th of August at Silverstone in Great Britain. In the desert, not far away from wine country in Northern California, race 16 in the 36 event series was on a road track instead of the more usual oval speedways. The stands were packed with spectators as the race got underway. It was a hot day and the on-track temperature was 115 degrees Fahrenheit for the 110-lap, 218-mile race. On just the 6th lap of the race, Sterling Marlin was tapped from behind, sending him spinning. He stayed in the race but finished 21st. Just 3 laps later, Dale Earnhardt ran over the rumble strips and his car got airborne and spun. He stayed in the race and finished 11th. On the 33rd lap, Rusty Wallace drove into the dirt and was narrowly missed by Kyle Petty. Wallace was 4th when he ran out of fuel a lap from the end and ended up 28th. Promising rookie Casey Kane also found the dirt and spun on lap 72. He recovered but could only manage a 31st place finish after a string of runner-up placings on oval tracks earlier in the year. He'd started the race in 30th place on the grid. But it was Jeff Gordon who won, picking up his 4th victory on the course, having led 92 of the 110 laps. Road race win number 8 was his 3rd win of the season and 67th for his career. He beat Jamie McMurray, in only his 2nd start at the Sonoma track, to the finishing line by about 10 car lengths, with road racing specialist Scott Pruitt 3rd.
McMurray in that 42 car, right there behind him.
Starting from the pole for the first time in Cleveland since winning here in 1993, Paul Tracy took a wide line into turn 1, but got clipped when England's Justin Wilson was shunted by Alex Tagliani. Wilson, the 6'3" driver dumped mid-season by the Jaguar Formula One team, had started from a career-best 2nd place on the front row of the grid. The British driver was a victim of the often problematic starts at the Burke Lakefront Airport temporary racetrack as he was hit by 5th place starter Tagliani. Canadian Tracy sustained major damage to the right rear of his car and headed straight to the pits for repairs. But after a routine tyre change in case of punctures, an inspection quickly revealed that the car was in no state to race and he was out. Tracy had started from the 20th pole position of his career. Last year's winner of the event, Frenchman Sébastien Bourdais, slipped around traffic in turn 1, avoided contact and safely got through the track's treacherous hairpin, where there have been crashes at the start 4 times in 5 years, to grab the lead. This was Bourdais' 3rd victory of the season and 6th of his Champ Car career. There were just 3 cautions for 12 laps, making it a relatively quiet race, despite the first lap carnage. Bourdais went on to lead 88 of the 97 laps on the 2.1-mile circuit. He held the lead for the last 37 laps and won by 15.1 seconds over his teammate Bruno Junqueira, with Tagliani finishing 3rd. Only 13 of the 18 starters were classified as finishers and only 7 were on the same lap as the winner. Junqueira leads the title standings by just 3 points from Bourdais, and Canadian Patrick Carpentier leads his countrymen Tagliani and Tracy in 3rd, 4th and 5th respectively. Al Unser Jr., a winning driver from a family that's won 9 Indy 500 races, announced his retirement from the sport recently. He'll concentrate on managing his son Alfred's budding racing career.
You know, Mario Andretti said it, you know, there's a There's a fine line between aggressive and being too aggressive, and you have to be right there if you're going to win races. And so, you know, I just felt that it was time. You know, I'm no longer willing to maintain that level of sacrifice, of desire, of, you know, just sheer drive and willing to put racing before everything in my life. And so, you know, comes a time you realize this, and so.
He battled to find a drive this year after breaking his pelvis last October when he was thrown from an ATV. He was the slowest qualifier and finished 22nd in his final race. Triple former world champion Niki Lauda was back on the grid at Monza to support his son Matthias in the European Formula 3000 series. Although Lauda was on pole, Nicky Pastorelli of the Netherlands took the lead into the first corner of the fourth round of the championship. There was chaos from that first turn. Norbert Siedler and Cristiano Tucca-Rocha were both pushed wide and cut the first chicane before rejoining the track in second and third place respectively, ahead of Lauda, who was hit by Siedler on the way. Newcomer Alex Lloyd lost it in the pack, collided with Alam Kodir on the first lap, forcing both drivers into retirement, and also took Tor Graves and Johnny Reed out on the spot. By lap 3, Pastorelli was in a clear lead ahead of Rocha, with Siedler third. Lauda moved up and with 5 laps to go began dicing with Siedler, the two of them banging wheels in their efforts to gain an advantage over the other. Unfortunately for Lauda, he was pushed off onto the grass and did well to stay out of the Monza barriers, but his suspension had been damaged in the second set of pushing and shoving. He pulled into the pits and retired. Siedler recovered and completed the race down in 7th place, over a minute behind the winner. Pastorelli had a relatively trouble-free run to the line to claim his maiden Formula 3000 victory, 3 seconds ahead of Cristiano Tucca-Rocha of Brazil, with championship leader Fabrizio Del Monte third, nearly half a minute behind. After 4 rounds, Del Monte has 34 points from Pastorelli on 21 and Siedler with 9. The 5th round of the 10-race championship is at Belgium's Spa-Francorchamps. The MotoGP circus flew across the Atlantic to Rio de Janeiro, with Sete Gibernau and Valentino Rossi tied in the championship on 126 points. But Rossi enjoys the bumpy track.
This is one of my favorite track where I ride. I always love ride in this track, especially with the 500 and with the MotoGP. Only the first year was a bad result, and after win always, and make great races also with the 500. Maybe it was the first victory of the 500 on the dry condition for me in the 2000. Win 2 times the world champions also. Yep. 1 time with 250 and 1 time the MotoGP.
The Repsol Honda Works team pairing of Brazilian Alex Barros, riding in his home race, and Nicky Hayden of the United States took time out to visit a Honda motorcycle factory in Rio prior to Friday's qualifying session. And both were given a hero's welcome by hundreds of workers at the facility. Barros and Hayden have had a modest season so far, but were hoping that local support would carry them to a good result on race day. Barros had 48 points and Hayden just 38 before the weekend. But in the first practice session, Barros had an embarrassing spill which dumped him at walking speed when his Honda developed an electrical gremlin, apparently not connected with the gearbox problem that threw him out of the lead in Assen. He recovered and posted an unofficial 3rd fastest practice time behind the similar Hondas of Gibernau and Makoto Tamada of Japan, and ahead of world champion Rossi's Yamaha. But in official qualifying, there was a surprise as Suzuki rider Kenny Roberts topped the lists. Valencia in 2000 was the last time that KR's Suzuki started from the front of the grid. and nearly 4 years later, he was back on pole position. And on the way to securing pole, Roberts smashed the lap record at the Nelson Piquet circuit. For those with a taste for rubber, it also represented a first pole position for tyre manufacturer Bridgestone since they joined MotoGP 2 seasons ago. Max Biaggi desperately needed a win to close the gap on Gibernau and Rossi and was second fastest in final qualifying. Third fastest and completing the front row was American Nicky Hayden. It was a good day for Honda as their riders took the top 5 positions, with Gibernau 4th and Barros 5th in front of a partisan Brazilian crowd. Despite constant work on his bike, Rossi, the defending world champion, had to settle for 8th place, making it the first time this season that either he or Gibernau have failed to secure pole position. Argentina's Sebastian Porto clinched the top spot in the 250cc category, the Aprilia rider producing a best time of 1 minute 52.5 seconds. Tony Elias of Spain on a Honda and Manuel Poggiali of San Marino earned 2nd and 3rd place respectively on the grid, ahead of points leader Randy Depunier of France. Hector Barbera on an Aprilia was almost 0.3 of a second ahead of the rest of the 125s. The Spaniard earned pole ahead of title favourite Andrea Dovizioso. Showing his appreciation of Barbera's exploits was Roberto Carlos. The Brazilian football star was more than an interested spectator. He'd announced earlier his purchase of a 40% stake in the team from another soccer great, Clarence Seedorf of the Netherlands. There was a change to the usual schedule on race day, with the MotoGP running first due to European interests in the Euro 2004 soccer final later in the day. Kenny Roberts grabbed the lead from pole, but it wasn't to last long as Biaggi chased the Suzuki rider. Within moments, Biaggi put his yellow bike in front and Roberts started his journey backwards down the order. He would finish 7th. Gibernau had a bad start, and in trying to catch up, he made a rare mistake and slid off the track on the first lap. Biaggi led for much of the race, but further back, his Honda teammate Makoto Tamada was moving up. By lap 12, the Japanese rider was exchanging the lead with his teammate. It was a good race for Tamada, but for Rossi it was disastrous. The Italian was in 4th place when he lost the front end and crashed out. Although he was unhurt, that was the end of his chance of scoring points. It was his first loss in 7 races at the Rio circuit and his first racing crash in 3 years. Tamada went to the front on lap 21 and stayed there until the finish. Biaggi hung on to finish 2nd, 2 seconds adrift, while Nicky Hayden gave Honda a clean sweep by finishing 3rd, 5.7 seconds behind the winner. Tamada achieved the only other podium of his career at Rio last year, finishing 3rd. 2nd place gave Biaggi 20 points, moving him only 13 points behind Rossi and Gibernau in the MotoGP standings. They remain tied on 126. Manuel Poggiali won the 250cc race, running his Aprilia to the front on the 22nd and final lap, just ahead of Spain's Daniel Pedrosa, who came in 7/100ths of a second behind on a Honda. 3rd place went to Tony Elias of Spain, who came in 3.7 seconds behind the winner, also on a Honda. The result sees reigning 125 world champion Pedrosa with a small gap over Depunier, and Poggiali moves up to 7th, 1 point behind countryman De Angelis. In the 125, Spain's Hector Barbera beat Australian Casey Stoner's KTM by less than 1/10 of a second. 3rd place went to Andrea Dovizioso of Italy, who finished a further 1/10 of a second behind on a Honda. Dovizioso still leads, but Barbera jumps up a place and the top 4 riders are within a single win of each other. Next race is at the Nurburgring in Germany. So, whether you're eyeing up new records and championships, falling off the road in California, or just quitting while you're ahead, so you stay on track and up to speed, make sure you catch next week's Drive.